All right, good evening. Yes, good evening, Ajans, members of the public, students. We have quite a full house today. Welcome, all of you. And welcome to the Architecture and Design for Society lecture series. I would like to begin by inviting our Dean, Ajan Sarayot Supsup, to the stage to deliver tonight's opening remarks. Thank you.
So good evening and welcome to the fifth installment of this Architecture and Design for Society lecture series for the academic years 2025. This talk invites guest speakers from various disciplines to exchange knowledge, ideas, and experience in architecture and design that focus on contemporary design issues and their impacts on the societies. So this evening we are honored to have with us David Schafer, principal of Studio Make, who may share his experience in architecture that emphasize labor, production processes, and materials in the real-world context. Through this lecture on the topic labor and materials, we hope to explore how the act of design and the performance of construction catalyzed by empirical knowledge derived in hand can contribute to architecture and society that are both meaningful and sustainable. Before we begin, I would like to thank Inda for hosting this event and our moderators, Ajahn Sang Chai, who is currently the third year coordinator at our International Program in Design Architecture. Thank you for joining us, and please join me to welcome David Schafer. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Hey guys, so this lecture series is held once or twice a month. Architects or licensed professionals can collect professional development points by attending these lectures. And those of you that attend more than 80% of lectures this semester can receive a certificate of completion. And you can also collect Learning Credit Bank credits, which can be transferred when applying for study programs at the Faculty of Architecture at our university here. Yes, the Faculty of Architecture would like to thank Sakuthai for supporting this event. And so yes, without further ado, I would like to introduce our lecturer this evening, David Schafer. So David Schafer is the founding partner, together with his late partner, Im Sarasalin Schafer of Studio Make. Studio Make is an office and a workshop based just outside Bangkok. It operates as a kind of close-knit team of dedicated individuals engaging the full spectrum of design and making through an evolving range of methodologies that move seamlessly between thinking and doing. As a practice, Studio Make maintains that deeper and more intuitive understandings of our environment emerge from more intimate scales of interaction. So within the studio and its workshops, ideas are tested through hands-on engagement, where tactile moments arise from continuous shifts between the act of design and the performance of construction. And this approach positions architecture not as a kind of distant abstraction, but as a lived material process, one where knowledge is produced through making and where construction itself becomes a form of inquiry. So please join us in welcoming David Schafer, who will share with us his insights into a practice and critical relationship between design, craft, and the built environment.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, did any of that make sense to anybody? A little bit? Okay, that's good. So I'm going to kind of expand on those concepts, but there will be pictures as well, so hopefully that will kind of help bring it together. So thank you for having me. Thank you for being here on this wonderful Wednesday evening. So whatever brought you here, I hope that you find something inspirational or something interesting in these slides. So can we dim the lights a little bit? Is that possible? No? Yes? Is it possible to dim the lights? This slide seems okay, but no? Okay. So, well, we'll just get into it. Okay, so I originally told John Patrick that this lecture would be titled Labor and Material, as that's been our title for lectures since 2014. Oh, that's great. Thank you. That phrase, labor and material, was meant to kind of distill down what our practice is about, fundamentally, in a very primitive way. And like the name of our studio, Studio Make, it's meant to be basic. But in preparing this lecture, I kind of rethought a lot of things. We'll get into those thoughts shortly. But I decided to kind of elevate a different one of our catchphrases, trust your hands. And I like that this is a little more of a call to action. It's a bit more of an outward view. I tend to be a little too introspective, maybe a bit too consumed by the work. And I'll be totally honest with you guys. I don't love doing these lectures. I find it pretty uncomfortable to sit in a dark room relying on words and kind of projected, blown out, low-res images. I'm much more comfortable talking about the work within my comfort zone, which is within the studio, within the workshop. And, you know, if you were to come to my workshop, I could wax poetic for hours about all the things we're working on and all of that stuff. But here in a dark room, it's different. I have to script everything out, otherwise I lose focus. But when you're in the workshop, when the thing is in your hand, it's different. So to that end, I'm going to attempt to bridge the gap a little bit between a dark room experience and the workshop conversation. So I brought with me these 10 little objects that are here on this table. And if you guys can grab them. So this is part of my team. These are studio makers here. And each one of their sweaty little hands is an object that we're going to pass out to you guys. So to be clear, these are not a gift. Please, I want them back. Yeah, just give them out. So the idea is that throughout this next half an hour, 45 minutes, each of these objects will come to you. And I want you to spend some time with it. Don't feel like you've got to kind of pass it on to your friend right away. Spend some time with it. Hold on to it. Feel it. Try to understand the material. Let your hand explore a little bit. So give it some time. Be careful. There are some sharp corners here and there. But again, just reflect on the object in your hand while you're listening to my droning words. And hopefully there will be some connection there. Okay. So, oops, wrong way. Okay, so let's get into the shop. I'm going to show you some images, maybe set the mood a little bit. And basically the plan is to show you the space, our studio and workshop, and then talk about some concepts, the guiding principles of our approach. Actually, I'm not sure that's the right way to say it. I wouldn't say that they are guiding principles because to me that seems that the words are in front of the work and we try to get the work to achieve the words. It's actually the opposite. The words and the ideas and the concepts that I'm going to show you are kind of a work in progress. They're concepts that are coming out of the work, a way of helping us define what we do. So we'll start with some objects, zoom out, think about the context of these objects and the work, and then I'm going to take a moment to kind of run through very quickly a lot of our previous projects, our previous work, to just kind of maybe so you understand a little bit more about the practice. So really quickly, really generally, and then what we'll do is we'll dive into some recent projects, so more kind of glossy photos of then finished work of all different scales. Okay? So I'm going to try to keep this relatively short because I want time for questions and time for conversation. So Please feel free to ask questions at any point, especially dumb questions. I love dumb questions. So if you have dumb questions, don't be shy. In fact, the only dumb question is the question left unasked. Right? Okay. So, again, let's keep this more of an open conversation, less of a lecture. I'll do my best. Okay, so back to the shop. Like I said, I'm more comfortable here in this space at the point of production, immersed among the samples, surrounded by the prototypes, empowered by the tools. So this is our temple, and certainly I can fall into the role of the priest or prophet, speaking the gospel of craft. But really it's less lofty than that. Really what we're trying to do is just make nice stuff. That's all this is about, is just making nice objects. That's all we want to do. And when I say we, I mean not only my design team, but also our team of Chang. So within the studio, there's about 21 of us, and about half designers and half welders, wood guys, fabricators. And so they're an integral part of the team. They're part of our process. There's really no separation between the thinking and the doing, or the designing and the making. And that's really what I'm trying to convey today. So while there definitely is distinctions between the designers in terms of maybe socioeconomic or educational background, within the workshop, within the studio, there's a lot of overlap. Okay? So it's important that not only do the designers learn to understand the catalytic opportunities inside the workshop, outside of the screen, it's important for the Chang to understand the power of the tools that are on the computer. And so it's truly a kind of a collaboration. Okay? So this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with gravity. So obviously it's hard to understate the importance of gravity within architecture. And within our practice, I'm thinking of a smaller scale of interaction. So again, back to the hand. Understanding the weight of material. So whatever object you're holding right now, or just finished holding, it has a sense of gravity. Literally a sense of weight, but also a certain conceptual sense too. So not only its physical properties, but also its conceptual properties, and the friction and the baggage of those properties that it brings to the conversation, to the table. Forward. Okay, so gravity, the weight of material, right? So this is a little laggy. There we go. Okay. So when I went to graduate school, I went to art school, not architecture school. And there's a lot to unpack about that experience. But specifically, I want to relay a quote that was conveyed to me by one of my colleagues, so another student that I studied with in art school. And he was talking about a dance choreographer. Getting a little abstract here. But the quote that he shared with me was, "When there is pressure, there is folk dance." And I really thought that that was an interesting, perspective. Now, the choreographer was talking about political pressure and obviously talking about cultural and communal expression. I'm talking about something much less interesting, or maybe much less important. But I like this idea that the friction of the design process, the pressures of materials, the pressures of processes, the pressures of clients, of budgets, of all of these pressures, that they all actually contribute to not an oppression, but actually a creative explosion. And so that's kind of the idea that I want to share with you, is that this remote control is not working. Okay. is that this pressure, these inputs, these parameters can actually have a positive influence. And this is what we're interested in this relationship between labor and material, the intersection between where these things come together when force is applied to material. And we believe that, I lost my way here. We believe that these conceptual and technical underpinnings, right, that not only the conceptual part of things, but the technical part of things allow for more creativity, right? Simply put, the more deeply we know a material or a technique, the more we can ask from it, okay? Even more simple than that, the more serious, the more weird, okay? So going a little further back to when I was approximately your age, and in architecture school, I read a copy of an essay by Marco Frescari called Tell the Tale Detail. And what really resonated with me in that essay was the way he talked about the detail as a generator, the way a small thing can create or lead to big things. And specifically this idea that the detail can play in both the constructing, the act of making, as well as the construing, the act of giving meaning. And so I really loved how those words are related. In other words, both material and words can give form. Okay? Oh. There we go. Okay. Jump. Oh, okay. It's fine. Okay. Fluency. The language of making. Okay? This is the second concept. So these details become language, quite literally in many ways. Like I've kind of expressed already, we have our studio in a way has a hard time communicating to others what exactly it is we do. What exactly is Studio Make? I may have perfect clarity in what we do in my head, but that doesn't mean that we do a good job of communicating it. So some clients know us as simply architects. We've also actually gotten phone calls, actually from this very institution, asking us to bid a welding job. So some people think of us as changle, just metal fabricators. And others, some of our peers, other designers, will call us when they want to make something that nobody else will make for them, nobody will touch. So we're designers in our own right, but also collaborators and also makers. And so this can be kind of confusing from a business model point of view. Actually, it's quite good from a business model point of view, but we can talk about that later. But certainly from a marketing point of view, it can be hard to kind of pin us down. So that brings us to scale and scope. So as you'll see shortly, the scale and scope of every project we do varies radically. However, I feel like our process never wavers. For us, the design is so deeply woven into every single part of every step of every project that starting with somebody else's concept doesn't mean that the opportunities for creativity have already been used up. Okay? And I'll show you some of the work where we're starting with another designer's concept and moving forward for that. And that sounds a little weird when you're in school, but it's much more interesting in reality. Okay. So for all of our projects, it involves at some point fabrication. It involves making. So truthfully, I don't know if I could go back to traditional architecture in a lot of ways. I think I may have lost the deep patience required to craft a really well set, a really well made, well considered set of construction documents. And actually our contracts these days exclude any sort of external drawings. So in a way, we try to do as little drawing as possible. We move from concept to shop drawings. And that's because we are making the things that we are conceptualizing. So it kind of minimizes our need for design communication and allows us to, in a way, stretch out the design process. I may be getting ahead of myself here. So we can essentially fast track certain parts of our project. We can start certain elements before we have other elements even resolved. Small example, we have a house project that we've been working on. We're doing it design, build, and we are working on the structural frame. We're prototyping the structural frame. We're getting bids for the foundation. However, we have not drawn elevations of the house. So we don't know what the house looks like, but we are working on the structure. And we're able to do that because we kind of control all steps of the process. So this really allows us to procrastinate, put off certain decisions. So we're avoiding drawing the elevation because we're just not quite ready to do it. So this maybe, all of this, maybe it's just about feeding our bad habits. Okay, so like I touched on before, because we are so close to the tools, we can speak directly to the material, we have more control over the process, and therefore things can just simply be more messy in a positive way. Speaking of messiness, the third concept that I'd like to share with you guys today is the idea of accuracy, and specifically the accommodation of error, okay? So in my classes, I do teach a little bit, and with new employees, oh wait, I'm skipping a section, sorry. I'll come back to that. Speaking of the tools, because we're always expanding the tooling, trying to expand our language, right, our communication, our opportunities for expression, for fabrication, and capitalizing on this idea of fast tracking that I was talking about, we develop these flexible systems. So when I say fast tracking, we're in a way not necessarily designing the thing at the end, but designing a process to get to that thing at the end, even if we don't know what it is. Okay? So again, we're kind of extending the creative process. So like I said, this is partially so that it allows us to expand it for our own benefit as designers, but also in some ways it makes some projects more realistic because timelines can be very short. So if a client comes to you and says, I need to open a restaurant in 2 months, that doesn't leave you with very much design if it needs to go out to bid, if you need to resolve what the color of this is and what light fixture that is before it can get bid. So we're kind of stretching things out. And within this process, by developing this kind of flexible system to accommodate that stretch, it also can accommodate mistakes, errors, right? So it is ideally a resilient system. So screw-ups are a truth of making. It happens, right? It's the result. I like to say failure is a privilege of pushing yourself into new territory, okay? And experience ideally teaches you to see what you don't know. So think about that a little bit. And that's a concept that we talk about in the studio a lot, is how do you know what you don't know? And there is this kind of weird understanding or sixth sense that some people have where you can anticipate what you don't know. And quite simply, that comes from experience. We'll talk more about experience. Okay, so moving on. The accommodation of error, tolerance and capacity. So specifically within tolerance, there is a technical definition to tolerance. How much error are you willing to accept when you are drilling a hole, when you are laser cutting something? So, like I said, in my classes with new employees, there's a little exercise I like to talk about, which is explaining the difference between accuracy and precision, which I won't get into detail here, but it's a critical distinction for a fabricator to understand. And I think it's an equally critical for a designer, whoever hopes to engage the material world, to understand. So even if you're not the person holding the tool, even if you're a designer who is, your realm of craft is in design representation and design communication, it's still very important, it's still very empowering to understand these materials and these concepts of craft. Okay? Any questions so far? I see some head nodding. I see very few people sleeping, so that's so far so good. Proud of you guys. Okay. So we're getting to the end here. So let's talk about this last concept here, the theoretical versus the empirical. And so with all of this stuff bouncing around in your head, I'm gonna pull out another quote on you guys, okay? Architects, Ajahns love quotes, right? Okay, so this quote came from the same classmate, the same art school nerd that I talked about before. And I'll share this quote with you guys, okay? Knowledge is rumor until it enters the muscle. Okay, I'm going to say that again for effect. Knowledge is rumor until it enters the muscle. And when I heard that, I just loved it. Like, it's a really, I think, beautiful poetic phrase. It's a really kind of strange arrangement of words. And I really like, to me, the key is the use of the word rumor, okay? So rumor has this negative connotation, right? It's this kind of scandalous knowledge, something that you know that maybe you shouldn't know, right? Something that came to you through possibly improper channels, and something that may or may not be true, okay? So I like this idea that this knowledge is a rumor, so something that came to you through your ears or your eyes and is now residing within you. It's perhaps not really relevant or not really solidified, or maybe it's not even really your truth until it's acted upon, until it finds its way to your hands. Okay? So this is what I'm talking about when I say trust your hands, right? That when knowledge comes in, concepts come in, ideas come in, that it's critical that they come out. Okay? So I'm going to drop another name on you guys. Yohani Pallasmaa has a really beautiful book called Eyes of the Skin, and he talks about this extensively, so I'm not going to take much ownership of it. If you're really feeling aggressive, check out that book. But the idea is that, you know, as a studio, in fact, the architecture profession in general believes that deep empirical, meaning first-hand knowledge earned from your hands is much more powerful than that of concepts, okay? That of theory. And that this deep, hard-earned knowledge, I'm going to read it so I make sure I get it right. This deep, hard-earned knowledge of materials and methods leads us to more creative solutions, okay? Things that we could have never conceived of without holding that tool in our hand and feeling the material respond. Okay? Okay, we're through the words. You guys with me? Any questions so far? Okay. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break from the kind of gritty process, these kind of dark, it's very dark on the screen, images from the workshop and all that stuff, and maybe we can see how some of this kind of plays out in the work, or doesn't. That's up to you guys. Okay, whoops, jumping ahead, that's fine. Okay, let's be here. So I'm going to take a moment, like I said, to actually have a little drink of water. Do you guys need a break? You okay? I'm going to get water. So I'm going to start off with some of our earlier work. And this was a ceramics project. So like I said, we went to art school. My late wife studied ceramics. And when we first moved to Thailand, we started off, because we assumed that the architecture would come slow, we started off with some ceramics work. And while we had a bunch of tools that we brought with us, we did not yet have a studio. And so this first project was about finding industrial ceramics and rendering them useless through decoration. We called it ornament and crime. And you might recognize the Benjerone pattern. So that's gold luster with the Benjerone patterns. And so we worked with these local suppliers to kind of give them these constraints. I said we thought the architecture would come slowly. It did, in fact, not. So some of our earliest projects as a studio were large institutional buildings. So this project on the left is Patna Gallery at Rangsit University, and this is pure architecture, drawings, and a thick set of construction documents. At the same time, we were working on our house and studio called Bansai Ma, which is in Nonthaburi. Come visit anytime. And for that, we did not only the design, but acted as the contractors and did some fabrication. This was our largest project, Guanyin Pavilion, also at Rangsit University. Also pure architecture, although we did some brick prototyping. So there's a custom brick in the project. We started to scale down or scale up in our scope, scale down in size. Before Grab, Uber came to Thailand, and so we did offices for them in Satorn. And that was an interiors project, and we did that design build and had some fabrication. These are some door handles that we made from wide flange beams that were then bent by heat, powder coated with some teak. So those are door handles. This is a house project for some family. This we also did the architecture and did the construction. This is a project at Central World. So these are some play structures that are still there, I believe. Yeah, okay. And I was mentioning the work that we've done for other designers. So we got these projects with a SketchUp model already done. No details, but just a rough idea. And we never spoke to the designers again. And so we took that design concept and then developed it. So it came up with all the details, came up with all the fabrication. And that was for Klein Daitham, which is a Japanese office run by a couple of Farang. That's my daughter there. You might see her in the room. We started work on a kindergarten project where we did some installations within the architecture. We did this library. We also did that play structure outside the window there. Also at Central World, some urban furniture. This is on the upper floor near the Apple store on the bridge to the BTS. So we came up with a system to make these concrete pots using pipes as formwork. So got that kind of, ends up with that shape as part of the process. This was a coffee bar we did in Saladang for a company called Roots, which you'll see more of work for them. This was design and fabrication. These are some tables we made at the Common Saladang at the same project. So these are these curving picnic tables. We just did a second version of these, delivered them last week. Congratulations, guys. This was the first project we did with a Thai artist whose name is Pinari Sanpitak, and you'll see more of her name coming up. We designed and built these shelves for her work. So it was a bit of a collaboration for this art installation. Another project for Roots. So they scaled up. The first cafe we did was fairly bespoke. And then they scaled up, wanted to open more locations. And so we actually helped them design a kind of cabinetry system, like a back-of-house system, in order for them to open locations more quickly. So this was more or less designing furniture, but in a way much more technical than that. So within this system, we also designed our own grease traps, designed plumbing, designed pumps, all of that's in there. And yes, this is one of the modules, one of the prototypes here. This is more work for Kun Pinari. So these are her vessels on top. and these vessels rock. So within this box here are servo motors and Arduino motors that will actually tip the lid a little bit and periodically make these vessels kind of shake and dance. So there was an image earlier with somebody soldering some stuff. They were soldering little Arduino boards. This is an evolved version of the coffee cart. So we took this module and slapped some wheels on it so that they could do catering events. This is a very large jump in scale. It's very hard to see. This is actually at the Seyang Patuan House, which is a new building in the lobby there. And this is some work for also Kunpineri. So these are her shapes and her kind of motifs within her work. And we helped her figure out how to make it really big. I'll just leave it at that. This is a project we did on Sukhumvit 39 called FV39 for this dude right here. And what we did was we made the ceiling. So we designed and made these triangular panels. Somebody else did the lighting. We just made these ceiling panels that could raise and lower. You can see the motors here, this kind of webbing system and these platforms. So it's a very kind of technical thing that we did for this gallery space. This is also fairly recent, again for Kunpineri. These are some giant tables that we made for Wonderfruit. And so there's 3 of these that sit on this giant boulder, which we had cut into smaller pieces. You'll see this boulder again. Well, actually not this part, but you'll see his children later on. Let me know when you recognize it. So this looks very simple and primitive, but in fact, it's actually very complicated inside. This is inside, which we can talk about later if there's time. But there's a lot going on in order to make something look very simple. Also up here, this was a prototype for these carts, again for Kunpineri. And these carts serve these kind of catering events. Just leave it at that, but they're carts. This project on the left, in a private residence. A couple years ago, we built this screen to help block a bad view. So a really beautiful condo, whole floor, top of the building. And all of a sudden they built a building right next to them. And so in order to kind of minimize that view, we built this screen. And then we just recently finished an accompanying ceiling system. So kind of playing off of this screen system, complementing it, but not challenging it. Okay. Everybody doing okay? Okay, so that's a lot of our previous work. And so you can kind of see this shifting in scale in some ways from the beginning. Again, these giant architecture projects. And then some door handles, and then some screens, and then some little things. Okay. So I'm going to show you maybe a little more in depth a couple projects. Whoops, wrong way. And we're going to start with a door. So this is a front and a back door. So 2 identical doors that we did for a house for a client. And the door we designed to use end-grain teak. So we bought up some teak and then sliced little pieces off, little blocks. And what we did was we made each block slightly different so that the door itself is thinner in the middle and thicker at the edges. And so it has this slight kind of curvature to it within the center of the door. And that's it. So very simple on the outside, complicated on the inside. So we came up with this system where some of the blocks have magnets, and those blocks will then hide the panel screws, which you can see here. So here the blocks are now all removed so that the panel screws can be accessed. And then you can see the inside of the door. Very dark. So it's this powder-coated structure. This is a closer. So normally the closer is integrated into the ceiling. So here we integrated it into the bottom of the door and connected it directly to the ground. Rather than connecting the top and the pivot at the bottom, we're kind of connecting the closer straight to the pivot. Sounds easy, not easy. So this is the push to the inside. So those are little stainless steel panels where they would push on the door. And that's it. This is a project we just finished, something a little more fancy, more elaborate. This is for a bar called Recording Bar. And we did this in collaboration with an interior designer. And so certain feature elements within the space. So these guys, this reel-to-reel, and then this center metronome, we designed and fabricated. And they're pretty elaborate things. So this is the reel-to-reel. We did it using a belt drive system, which I had never done before, so that was kind of interesting, figuring that out. And so we ordered these wheels, but then laser cut, fabricated, figured out how to tension all of this stuff. This is the metronome. So the metronome has two, kind of four quadrants. So two sides, there's two metronomes. This is the metronome that kind of goes back and forth. And then this is a light fixture that actually rotates. So you can see their little logo here. There's a light in the middle. And so these elements rotate around that. So here you can see a little closer. It's hard to photograph bars. So you can see the mechanisms. Pretty complicated little thing. Found these really beautiful bearings that are open. Stainless steel. So this, again, laser cutting, bolting it all together, trying to figure out gear ratios and all that stuff. Oops, am I going the wrong way? No, that's right. Here you can see the belts. And actually we had an INDA intern help us with this. Is he in the room? Probably not. He's already sick of us. So these belts are overlapping, and then the shafts are nested so that all of these parts can move independently. See that there? These are the headphones. So the original reference was a disco ball, and so we put little earphones on the disco ball. Inside those earphones, inside these CNC teak pieces are lights. And then at the top here is a bearing. So it's a little bit of an Easter egg. It's kind of on the wall, so it looks decorative, but if you reach up, if you ever go to Rec Bar, you can reach up and kind of spin this sphere here. It'll rotate. So that's Rec Bar. Okay. So we'll get into a residential project. So this is an interior renovation in the same project as that screen that I showed you before. So it's just one bedroom. Took us years to do. You'll see why. We're really slow. And maybe it's a little over the top. So it's kind of a bedroom suite. It's almost like a single hotel room. So this is the entry area here with a desk. This is kind of looking back towards the living area, couch and TV. The curtain there to kind of close things off. Oh, there's another curtain up there for the bed area. And then this large screen here is actually a door that can close the panel off, or a panel that closes off the bathroom. So this is the bathroom kind of hiding behind here. So this is looking into in the bathroom area, looking into the shower back there. So within the shower space, there's a small dressing area, and then a kind of a sitting area within the shower that has this stone. And this is a single piece of stone. See, kind of carved out the rough edge. There's the teak seat on the outside, the leather pad. This is within the shower. Those are the controls for the shower. Leg for the desk. This is actually the headboard. So this is teak, integrated the light switches, and these little light fixtures, so like a reading lamp. This is actually the simple side. The other side has other switches to turn on and off the rest of the room. This is leather here on the headboard. This is the surface on the desk. So this is the idea that you kind of come in and you put your phone down and you throw your keys, and then all the controls to turn the room and open the blinds and all that stuff is there, kind of mission control. Okay, this is maybe the smallest project we've done. So this was another bar project, and we made some coins. So these were VIP coins, and these are the prototypes. The client already had a coin. They already had 2 VIP coins made, and I should have brought them. They look great, but they suck because they feel cheap. And that makes a huge difference. So what he asked us to do was just to make a coin that doesn't necessarily look better, but feels better. So he wanted something that when people took the token, the free thing, you go to the bar, you spend some money, and the bar guy gives you something free. When you take it and you get it home, and the next day you empty your pockets out, you want to keep that thing. You don't throw it out. Like, it has this kind of memory. And you might even think to yourself, if you're a tourist who comes here and you fly back home and you hear of a friend that's going to Bangkok, you'll be like, oh my God, you got to go to this bar. Let me give you this coin. You can get in, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point was that the weight of the material was critical. So these are the prototypes. This was the final version of the Ultra VIP coin. So this coin actually has a chip, an RFID chip inside to open a locker. So you buy some stupid expensive bottle of whiskey, you can go back and access that anytime. These coins are for the more poor people. This is the brass coin. This is the stainless steel coin. That's it, just a couple of coins. Okay, last project. You guys doing okay? Okay. Granite. So these are pieces of granite that were cut off of the table out in the field. So the table in this project is the same owner. So we were able to later on kind of integrate this granite into his project for his office. So it's for Bangkok Motor Works, and we did a few pieces of furniture. So these are some benches in the waiting area, using these teak logs that we had turned. And then again, I was talking about a system before. So these logs kind of are this modular system where the benches and the tables can be reconfigured. So again, we had these logs lathed down and then drilled to accept these pipes on the top, but then there's also plates on the bottom that integrate with the different bases. See that detail? How things kind of plug in. This little detail on the end is to help prevent splitting. So the logs are from the center of the tree. It's not particularly, there's no such thing as bad teak, but it's not particularly old growth teak. So it's fairly prone to cracking. But we didn't want to cap the end. So what we did is kind of like a fake inner cap. So there's a stainless steel plate inside here. Whoops. Oh, there you go. There's a stainless steel plate that has a lot of screws that go into the wood to help keep it from splitting. And then this side has a lot of screws that help keep the cap from splitting. And then we tried to kind of have a thick enough chunk where it's not too thin, but thick enough that hopefully it doesn't split. The cover doesn't split. And then it's bolted on. So it's kind of like a cover piece. We're kind of having that kind of technical thing rather than capping the end and hiding this kind of beautiful end piece in order to prevent it from destroying itself. We're kind of pushing that further back, that kind of delaying that detail a little bit. I don't know if it's going to work. I'll let you know. This is a couch within the main office. So again, modular. So just kind of upholstered cushions with some traditional Thai pillows. This is a meditation platform. And then the cushions can kind of be reconfigured for more intimate conversations or for taking a nap. Also within this space is this desk. So the shape of this desk is this kind of boomerang shape. And we inherited that shape. That came from the original interior designer. And so we had this kind of weird shape we needed to work with. And we had the idea early on of kind of having this thin stainless steel surface that was anchored by this heavy piece of stone. And so that was the concept we pitched that he liked. And then we were like, shit, now we got to figure out how to make it. And so within a lot of our other structures, we'll laser cut a kind of grid system in order to strengthen this thin top. Because of the curvature, when you laser cut things and fit them, it's fine when it's perpendicular. You guys will figure this out someday. But once you start to introduce angles, everything falls apart. It doesn't work. And you need that really tight fit, that really tight tolerance in order for it to assemble. Now, part of the assembly process is not just about strength. You know, you can have a loose joint and then weld it, and all that's fine. But part of the reason we do these joints is also for indexing purposes. So indexing is a fabrication concept. But basically the idea is that it allows the guys to assemble it more easily. So we laser cut all the parts, and then it's like a model, right? A model that you buy from MBK, and all these little things fit, slots tab together. And so we weren't quite sure how to have this kind of structural system, have these indexing properties, and yet have these weird curves. So it took us a while, but we figured out a way, where do we see underneath? You can kind of see here, of using pipes. So there's a sample that's floating around. Did somebody put it in their bag already? There's a sample with an X and a pipe. Does anybody have it? Do not steal my samples. I will find you. I will find you. Somewhere out there, there's an X with a pipe in it. There it is. Thank you. Hold that up. Yep, so it's that sample. Hopefully everybody touched it. Actually, why don't you guys just start sending the samples back to the front? Somebody lock the doors. Actually, it's true. These of John have not touched the samples yet. So send them back up to the front. Don't throw. Gently pass. So here you can see, actually, I'll take that. Actually, both of these samples are from that project. So basically, by having that pipe in there, that means that the plates can come together at whatever angle they need to, and we don't need to laser cut a specific angle for every joint, but we just use pipe. And so the joint still indexes itself. It still locks exactly where it needs to be because it's going to be centered on the pipe, but it allows the angle to be whatever it needs to be. So we didn't actually need to calculate the angle or laser cut 287 different pieces for every joint. That's that. You guys are going to have too many joints now. Okay, this little guy here, this little kind of wedged, kind of terraced landscape here, is a shim that we had to use underneath the logs. So the logs, after they laid them nice and straight, after we drill the holes and they start to dry, these things really start to warp. So we had to create a series of shims at each location in order to kind of compensate for the twist of the wood. So that's what this is. Basically, we would kind of measure and then model exactly what we needed, and then have the guys cut and weld little wedges. This is a wire tray at the bottom, so there's hides the wires to the lamp, which go back. This is my favorite shot. I'm going to just stand here and be really proud of myself for this one for a minute. But this is an acrylic cutout on the top. I don't know if there's a photo of the top of the desk. We spend so much time underneath it. That allows the light on top to kind of shine through and highlight the legs. There's also a cabinet, so that kind of black box that you saw was a cabinet. And so the drawers on the cabinet actually pivot out. This sample right here, perfect. Thank you. Oh, it's so warm. This makes me so happy. So many people are touching this. Maybe that's unsanitary, but it's really nice and warm. That's awesome. So this is the pivot. This is a crossed roller bearing here. So that means this roller bearing here can take axial loads as well as thrust loads. So most bearings can't take loads in both directions, but this one can. So this allows, it fits right in there. Actually, you can kind of see the top of the shaft, but this is underneath each one of those drawers, and it allows the drawer to kind of swing out and swing back in without moving or sagging at all. So that's the crossed roller bearing. You're welcome. And that's it. That's all I got. So, if you guys have any questions, actually, how much time do we have? How much time did I take? All the time? I took an hour? I'm proud of myself. Usually I'm like really fast. Okay. So
it's a good pace.
Yeah, not much pressure for questions then.
But yes, we would like to open up the floor to any questions. Okay, maybe while you're thinking, I can open up with a warm-up question. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you, David, for a very thought-provoking presentation. I particularly enjoyed the kind of attention to detail and tactility in your work. I think perhaps my question is maybe more of a technical one. So you mentioned something that kind of resonated with me for the rest throughout the talk. It was the more serious, the more weird. Right?
100%.
Yes, and I guess that's kind of to do with the kind of fluency in knowing how the tooling and the kind of understanding of the material behavior. Perhaps you could describe a moment or a particular design where it was the most weird.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that's, that's the more, what did I say? The more technical, the more...
No, you said...
The more serious.
The more serious, the more weird.
Serious, the more weird.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's the thing that I want design students to really understand. That this technical knowledge, you might kind of think like, well, how's this going to help me design? But that technical knowledge, the more you know about the tools, the process, the material, the more weird you can be, right? So if you don't really understand how a chair is made or how furniture is made or even how a building is actually made, you're really just kind of styling, right? Your limits or your scope is going to be limited to form, shape, color, texture, those kinds of things. So I really think that if you guys understand kind of this technical knowledge, this intimacy with not only the tools but the craftsman, I think that's another thing that makes architecture a noble but complicated profession, is that there's so many layers in order to get something made that your design ideas have to make it through those layers. So your ability to relate to and speak the language of the people that will be making. So the first thing is like, be able to talk to contractors and, show up and bring, some Emloy Hasip and make friends and all that stuff. That's one thing, but it's also bigger than that. It's not just about talking to the contractors and the Chang, but also talking to the people that finance it, understand the people that approve it, those sorts of things. So that technical knowledge just simply allows you to be more creative, more weird.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions from the floor?
Yes.
Oh, yes. One moment.
Thank you very much for your insightful conversations with us. Well, my question is related to whether the new technologies like 3D printers will actually be suitable for certain situation. Like, for example, you want to actually have a pipe stick to a granite surface. And that is actually underneath. There's nothing to be shown. Wouldn't that be easier if you actually use some sort of technology to help you to stick that thing to something that is not even surface? Because you put a lot of design into something that is hidden inside. I know that you're proud of it because what do you call it? Knowledge is rumor until it gets into muscle. that is the kind of thing that I like. But what I mean is that when it comes to making this kind of thing, you probably have a hard time reproducing it because it's fit to a certain context that is more serious and more weird. So I want you to comment on this kind of thing, whether Studio Make would consider applying some of the new technology to help you make something that is almost impossible, make it possible.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The short answer is yes. Within 3D printing in general, for the most part, it's accessible at a point for representational things, right? So generally it's used to represent a small building or represent some prototype or, like a toothbrush or something like that, right? There are technologies out there that you can 3D print metal. There's definitely technologies out there to 3D print or, let's say, digitally fabricate usable things, and is becoming more and more accessible. Within our studio, like I said, because the technology 3D printing specifically is generally used for representational things, we haven't prioritized it as a tool. However, that being said, there's definitely a lot of fabricators or designers that work like we work that will use 3D printers to make jigs. So you're 3D printing in order to make a fixture, in order to make something else. And that can be incredibly powerful to kind of use it, not necessarily as the finished object, but as a step towards, setting an angle or fixturing something, holding something in space. So it's a very powerful tool for that, for sure. Some ways I don't think we necessarily, sometimes we might come off as anti-technology, but that's definitely not the case. It's just usually that we invest in the techniques and the materials or the techniques and the tooling that we have access to. And there's stuff that's kind of filed away. Like, I came across a metal casting company that will cast bronze, low temperature stuff. And they have a 3D printer that can print sand. So they 3D print the mold in sand. And that's pretty cool. You can't really do anything with that 3D printed sandcastle. But it's like a technology that's always in the back of my head, and I'm looking for an excuse to use it. I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, I definitely think that, we tend to have been a pretty 2D, or I am pretty 2D in a lot of ways, and we're trying to push towards more advanced technologies for sure as they become accessible. Within the studio, we've started using Fusion 360 more, which is an Autodesk product that's parametric modeling. So when you model something, it's smart. You can model a piece of sheet metal like this, and the model knows its thickness, and it knows how to fold and unfold itself, and so it can calculate the angle, or the radius in which the metal will bend. So some of us in the studio are getting more versed and comfortable with that. Another question in the back. Thank you.
One moment, I'm coming.
I didn't expect you to make a building straight away, like you didn't expect to either, and kind of adds to the question of like previous question about more serious is more weird. Having more technical ability or understanding allows us to express more, and you got a building straight away, even though you kind of saw like ceramics was you understood it more and you had more control of the whole process. I'm in a similar situation where like I didn't expect to get such large things thrown at me, but I still want to have that full grasp and like seriousness and playfulness to it. So how do you figure that out when you got thrown a building at you straight away as your first project, right?
Well, in all fairness, we did have experience. So we had worked in the States for architecture studios doing, larger projects. So I will say that I had the opportunity to we both had the opportunity to work for offices that knew how to put together a tight set of drawings with discipline. So that was tremendously helpful to already have some of that under our belt. In a way, we kind of stuck to what we knew. So we were working within those like the Patna Gallery is really just a large version of our house. It's wide flange, precast concrete slabs. And so we were working with a very primitive material palette that we were comfortable with. And so, the Patna Gallery, there's a lot of stuff happening with moire patterns and expanded metal mesh. Like nothing that special, but we were just basically working and trying to push the limits of what we were comfortable with. So I guess that would be the advice that I would give is like to not try to do too much, and then experiment with what you're comfortable with. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps, but good luck.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Okay, yes.
Here, you can ask and then I'll answer.
So I have a question that when choosing materials, do you prioritize tactile experience, durability, sustainability, or narrative meaning? How do you balance them all?
Yes. It really kind of depends on the answer is always going to depend on the question in a way. I mean, going back to his question, like we're definitely sticking to materials that we're comfortable with and know intimately. And so while a lot of our work, a lot of these objects say have stainless steel, I don't necessarily feel like that's the answer for every question. But at the same time, like we know it really well and we know what it can do. We know how to control it. We know how to weld it. And so generally the question or the answer about, what material to select is balanced in what we know we can do well, but also what we want to know next. So we do often find an excuse within new projects to kind of incrementally push things forward. So, you might think that like those guys work with stone. Not until last year we didn't, so the giant piece of granite that kind of came from, that came out of a conversation with the client, and then it was a material that we had to explore, and then we try to figure out how to work with it, what are the tools, what can we outsource, what do we need to buy ourselves. And so we're kind of slowly expanding our material palette so that when the questions come up, we can answer it. You asked about sustainability. I think that's an important topic, and I don't think it's one that we answer very well. Like my studio, I wouldn't say that our materials are sustainable, in terms of like a clean label. I guess our approach to sustainability is to try to make things that last. Certainly a lot of our work can be recycled at the end of its useful life. But sustainability to me is, again, not just a label like this is a green material, but maybe a methodology or a practice as well. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I guess it's, we're always, again, it just depends on the question and the parameters that are driving the project. It just kind of happens organically. I don't know what else to say, but yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that helps.
Okay, thank you, David, for a very insightful conversation. Yes, round of applause, please.